About it.
I'm just going to grab a cup of coffee.
Yeah. And we do have the screen available, so we can maybe look up some bills or show folks how to access information, because I'm going to talk a little bit about process and how you can get engaged and what's happening at the legislature, because what and how things are happening affects the content and the decision making. Put my coffee down. So we went into session on February 20th, and this week was the last, what we call a deadline week. So the workflow changes. This was a week where we had to pass things through committee. So up till now, Matt and I would be getting up there at 7 or 8 in the morning, and we would be going, essentially composing. Now, in that composition, a number of the things that I would propose didn't get included, but we were involved in the composing of bills. And those bills move through, we hear bills individually, and then what happened this week in every committee is omnibus bills were created. So in the Environment Committee, and those of you who get my email updates, you're probably thinking, why is Rick always talking about the environment? Well, that's the committee that I'm on, and I'm on the Ag Committee, and Matt's on the Healthcare Committee. So as we're going through this process, we are engaged in that composition, in that content. I don't know what's going on in the Healthcare Committee because I'm in the environment world, and then when that committee is done, I've got to shift into the capital investment world, and then every now and then MNLARS pops up and I have to deal with car registrations, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So we're involved in that development of bills, and so this week in the Environment Committee, the legislature passed through the committee an 84-page bill that was 14 pages of appropriations, and the rest was policy. And that policy were individual bills, which I described as I know a guy bills. That almost everyone was, I know a guy who's got a problem, or I know a guy who's got this problem. And so they were individual problems like access to a lake, somebody's individual thing. They were not the broad issue, what are we going to do about climate change, water quality. They're somebody's individual bone in the throat that they were having trouble with, that got brought to the legislature and got brought into development of law. And so when you hear the governor say he does not want policy in the appropriations bills, that's what he's talking about. Most of that, and so if you want the money, you have to take the policy because you're voting on one big bill. What happens now, because all of that composition is done, and there are two areas where the composition continues, capital investment and taxes. But in healthcare, public safety, environment, agriculture, education, all of that composition is pretty much done. And we shift our activities to the floor. So when I say the floor, I mean the chambers of the House and the Senate. So we are going to be debating those all together. So 134 people, about 133 now, because Representative Thiessen just was appointed to the Supreme Court. And I'll just, as a side note, say that is an excellent appointment. Brilliant man, bringing that value to the Supreme Court. And 67 in the Senate. So 67, 66, not sure. So you shift to the floor. So next week, we will be in session in the chamber, in the House. We normally have been in full session only on Mondays at 3:30 and Thursdays at 3:30. And the rest of the time has been in committee. Now we will be going in at 10 o'clock each day, and we'll probably then break for caucusing to go over the bills and then come back, and then we won't know when we'll come back. And we won't know when we'll be done. And if we don't know when we're coming back, and we don't know when we're going to be done, you don't know, because we don't know. So people say, what's going to happen on Tuesday? And I can honestly tell you, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. We should be able to have, to schedule so you can have public participation. You should have that stuff posted so you can find out when things are at. And so that's where a change has occurred in time where, for example, yesterday we had a deer audit. And it wasn't on TV, it wasn't live streamed, so while we were hearing it, I was tweeting out what was happening, because that was one way to get the word out. So that's why you see legislators using more social media, because things are happening so fast, and I'll have people call back and say, well, how come you didn't let me know earlier? Well, again, because I didn't know. We didn't know when things were gonna happen. So on Monday, what we do know is we will hear 4 bills on the floor. One of those will be about wild rice and sulfide standard. And so that bill was calendared, so we found out it would go on the calendar on Thursday night, and then we had to have amendments in by noon yesterday. And if we didn't get an amendment in by noon yesterday, there are no other amendments. Now, the good side of that is you can tell what those amendments are and who's authored them. And we have the weekend where you can contact us about those amendments or about the bill. But when we get into the week, so an amendment for Tuesday will have to be submitted Monday by noon. So we have to compile that amendment. An amendment for Wednesday will have to be submitted by Tuesday at noon. So there's a very quick turnaround time that we have to do. This week on Thursday was a very busy day at the Capitol. We had a number of groups having their day on the Hill, and we were also in that composition for the environment bill. And lo and behold, we had a deputy registrar's reimbursement bill. And I didn't really notice that until, what, Jamie? Like Wednesday morning, we have a bill up on the floor. So we had to scramble to get an amendment, and the amendment was submitted at 11:55 a.m. That we wrote. So it literally, I have to shift from environment into composition on amendment on MNLARS. And what we were doing there is reimbursing the deputy registrars $9 million for the expenses that they did not anticipate to try to keep them open. The deputy registrar in South St. Paul, I met with them last week, they have lost $100K. They're $100K in the red from the increased cost. Now, of the 174 deputy registrars, 1/3 are city, 1/3 are county, and 1/3 are private. So those public ones, county and city, if they're having losses like that, where does that go? That goes to you on the property taxes to have to cover those expenses. So this reimbursement is to help, and we got the amendment passed so that the money would become, my amendment was to make sure the money would become available upon signature this fiscal year, because we're hearing that there are 3 deputy registrars that will close. The GOP's bill had the money become available after July 1st. The GOP took my amendment, which is rare, but it passed on a unanimous voice vote, and the bill passed with 1 vote in opposition, bipartisan unanimous vote. And that's because work that happens very quickly, but also there has to be this reservoir of trust where you can have knowledge and communication about, you know what you're talking about. And there's gonna be more stuff on MNLARS because on the state level, there's probably $30 million that are needed to continue closing that process. I will have to shift from wild rice to MNLARS sometime next week and then back again. Plus, we are working on trying to get the money for Robert Street. So I mentioned there are 2 committees that are still in composition. Capital Investment is still composing their bill. We need amount, when we say cash, that means general fund dollars, because we can no longer bond for Robert Street because the project is completed. So it's a heavy lift to try to get $3.7 million in cash to pay for reimbursing the city for the traffic signals on Robert Street. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we're not doing it. And you may not see it on TV and we may not be tweeting about it because we have to get it in the bill. If we don't get it in the bill, then it's almost impossible. So it takes persuasion, it takes communication, it takes constant effort, much of it that you can't see. And hopefully you can see what happens when the bill comes to the floor. Of all the bills I've introduced this year, I've only had hearings on 2 bills. The majority does not. This is another common question. Why can't you just have a bill heard? It is up to the majority to hear the bills. The speaker does not have to hear the bills. They do not have to calendar the bills. The committee chairs do not have to hear the bills. We can introduce a bill, but it may not be heard. The only 2 bills that I've had heard this year, one was the dedicating of alcohol, the gross receipts for alcohol, originally from Sunday sales, but it was hard to quantify Sunday sales, so we took 5% of the increase of the gross receipts of taxes, not the excise tax, but the gross receipts tax for alcohol, and to dedicate that to recovery programs, 50% for treatment and 50% for prevention. That's about $5 million a year. It has taken me 4 years to get one hearing. But I got the hearing. So it's been a good week. They heard the bill, and when you hear the bill, there's progress, because again, they're not going to put the bill, they're not going to put it in if they don't hear it. If you don't hear it, you're not going to get it in. So we got a hearing on that. The second one was Lilydale. Lilydale, with the reroute of Highway 13, had to put in some stormwater conveyances. That cost about $700,000. Lilydale's total annual budget is $500,000. So Lilydale actually had to bond, and that project is done. Lilydale had to bond to cover those costs. Now last year in the bonding bill, we got $275,000 in cash. Again, not bonding because the project was done, so that helped cover it. But the cost continued to increase, and Lilydale doesn't have it. So I had John Deal, Lilydale City Councilor, testify. Got the hearing to hear the bill, only asking for $150,000. We didn't want to be greedy and ask for it all. We wanted to be conservative, so we asked for $150,000 additional to help reduce the cost. And I got the hearing, and I found out yesterday it's in the bill.
Nice.
So it's not in the bill exactly the way I wanted it, but because we asked for $150,000, but what they put in the bill was $25,000 a year for 6 years of local government, because they wanted a low number. They didn't want a big number. So don't tell anybody, because I don't want to take it out. But all that work is going on that you may not see while we're dealing with the big issues that are happening. So we continue to work on capital investment and taxes. Those were both in the tax committee. I don't know yet if the alcohol dedication will be in there. I'm hopeful. I'll continue working. I have colleagues on the other side of the aisle that are asking for it. I had Representative Frankie sit right next to me when we presented the bill, so it was a bipartisan bill. And I'm hopeful that we would get that. We had to write it so that it wouldn't go into effect until the next fiscal year, so that then it could be accounted for in future budgeting, and it wouldn't be taking money from the general fund, from education, because if you take $5 million out of the general fund, out of an existing budget, then that affects, just like the transportation constitutional amendment. So if you progress it forward, then it has to be accounted for. I know this is all very processy, but it's kind of what we're doing right now. It's helpful when we have a hearing or when we have things on the floor, because they come up rapidly. Your power is in contacting us by email or Facebook messaging or Twitter messaging or sending in a letter or a note or calling in the office. That helps us, because we can say we've heard from people. We're going to hear from you today as soon as I'm done talking, and I will be done very quick. It is an important time because we have to be done in a month. And so things can move very fast, and sometimes things can move very slow. I'm hopeful we get done on May 20th. And so what we would do, I know it's West St. Paul Days, the 18th, 19th, 20th of May. Our day that we have to be done is May 20th. So our last legislative day, when we adjourn, we will go around the clock till 7 a.m. and we have to adjourn at 7 a.m. on Monday morning on May 20th. I hope we do this before the parade in West. I don't think we do good things in the middle. My mom always said, what happens after midnight, it's not good. If you're out past midnight, it's not good. And if we're there past midnight making law, it's not good. It's better to be in the daylight. It's better for you to be there. And because we're so close, if you watch us online and or show up. Showing up is powerful. So with that, I'd open it up.